Hey Vinyl community, this is Tim with the University of Vinyl, back today with a new video. I'm going to be featuring just one album today. This is going to be episode 2 of my fairly new series called Liner Notes. And my first album that I featured for Liner Notes was a little over a month ago, and it was Let Me Up, I've Had Enough by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. The premise of this video is to shine a light on albums in an artist discography that I think have been maybe forgotten in time. Maybe they're not getting as much focus as I think they should be, and today's album especially, I don't see anyone in the VC ever talking about it. And today's album is going to be Silver and Gold by Neil Young. It was released in 2000. Stay tuned. Here's the cover of Silver and Gold. This was released in April 2000. It's a Neil Young solo album, but he does have an incredible group of musicians behind him on this album that we're going to talk about. And cool little tidbit, the artwork on the cover and the back cover was actually photographed on an old Nintendo Game Boy camera. Remember, this is like 1999, 2000. Neil Young, always on the cutting edge as far as technology is concerned, and has always been a bit of a geek about things like that. Gave his daughter what at the time was the world's smallest digital camera, and we've got that kind of cool pixelated artwork as a result. Before we dig further into this album, I think it's important to take a look at a timeline of where Neil Young was in 1999 and 2000, so the turn of the century, from the 20th into the 21st century. And looking at the timeline, we can see that Neil did a solo acoustic show between the months of March and June of 1999. And these were very cool, kind of Neil there with a semicircle of acoustic guitars, typically maybe a banjo. Of course, he would probably have that pump organ along with him.
Even a new building like this is full of spirits. Everything is, places I played here before are now just, shells of them becoming office parks and stuff, Doesn't seem to bother anything. What about that traffic, though? Man, that's right. What's that all about? Direct flight from San Francisco. Man, I used to have to go through hoops to get here.
He would deliver 20 or 22 songs every night that kind of worked perfectly acoustically for what he was trying to put across in that tour. And interestingly enough, and you don't see that anymore today, Neil actually played between 6 and 8 songs every night that would eventually comprise Silver and Gold, which would be released in April of 2000, so basically a year later. And a year earlier, here he was playing many songs from the album during that spring tour. If we move along in the timeline, we can see that in October 1999, there was a reunion album released by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young called Looking Forward, and In the putting together of that album, Neil contributed 3 songs that were actually earmarked for silver and gold. So kind of interesting, including the title track. Moving ahead, now also in conjunction with that CSNY album, there was a full-blown reunion tour of Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and that went all the way into the spring of 2000. Finally, in April of 2000, Neil released Silver and Gold, and then kind of surprisingly, in June, he released a DVD of a concert that dated back to that spring tour of 1999 that was actually filmed at the Bass Theater in Austin, Texas. There are almost all the songs from that DVD you can find on YouTube today. I haven't checked. I'd like to see if that's streaming because it's actually a very, very good show. When we talk about silver and gold, we need to kind of think in terms of a lineage of albums that Neil Young did over the years. Remember, this is a totally acoustic album. There's a little bit of pedal steel on here by Ben Keith, who we're going to talk about some more as well. But back to that Lineage idea. This came out in 2000. A direct descendant of this album is Comes a Time from 1978. Some of the same players that are on Silver and Gold are on Comes a Time. And then we need to go back further, and there is the first of the Lineage. So, of course, the most famous Neil Young album of all time, arguably, is Harvest, released in 1972. I've got a very nice Chris Bellman reissue cut here in my hand, 180-gram vinyl on, of course, that Steamship Reprise label. Take a look at the back cover. That gentleman sitting at the pedal steel is none other than Ben Keith. Ben Keith co-produced Harvest, he co-produced Comes a Time, and he co-produced Harvest Moon as well, which I don't have a copy of at the moment. I have a CD somewhere. And Ben Keith actually co-produced Silver and Gold as well, the album that we're talking about today. And we can also talk about where things were recorded. That's the old barn at Broken Arrow Ranch, Neil Young's compound, just outside of Woodside, California, San Francisco Bay Area. A lot of Harvest was recorded there. All of Harvest Moon was recorded there as well. Broken Arrow, the 1996 album, was recorded here. And also, Silver and Gold was recorded there. Let's talk about some of the players who are on Silver and Gold. First of all, Ben Keith was a co-producer on the album, and he was a co-producer, like I mentioned earlier, on both Harvest and Comes a Time. Ben Keith is mainly pedal steel. He'll add a little electric guitar here and there, but mainly known for his steel guitar work. Spooner Oldham is on this album, and he's also on Comes a Time. I believe he's on Harvest Moon as well. Spooner is a famous, one of the original members, at least in the early 70s and mid-70s, the Muscle Shoals Cats. He's been on a ton of albums by Bob Dylan, Aretha Franklin, and a lot of Neil Young work as well. Spooner is a fantastic piano player, also plays Hammond organ, electric piano as well. On drums on this album, primarily it was Jim Keltner. I think Kenny Buttrey, who was actually all the way back looking at Harvest, he was on the Harvest album. But Jim Keltner is the probably most famous session drummer alive, and he's done a ton of work with Bob Dylan, John Lennon. He's on some Ringo albums. He's all over the map as far as if you pull up his credits on AllMusic or Discography, you'll be amazed. So the famous Jim Keltner plays drums on this album. And last but not least, the fantastic Donald Duck Dunn played bass. And Donald Duck Dunn, if you didn't know, was an original member of Booker T and the MGs, straight out of Memphis. And Donald Duck Dunn, when John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd were putting together the Blues Brothers, they looked to none other than Duck Dunn to play bass for that whole Blues Brothers project. I think he appears in the Blues Brothers movie and plays bass on this album. He also played bass on the next Neil Young release, which was came in 2002, Are You Passionate? Another album that's kind of overlooked if we talk about Neil Young albums. So that's kind of the cast of characters. Oh, by the way, he also went out and talked to Linda Ronstadt and Emmylou Harris. Of course, Linda Ronstadt singing backup on Harvest, and brought those ladies into the fold as well to provide some extra color on this fantastic set of songs. A lot of people think that Silver and Gold is kind of a mishmash of leftover songs that Neil has had written all the way back into the late 70s and into the 80s. But actually, many of these tunes were written in the late 90s, all the way up to the time of recording in 1999. However, the title track, famously, Silver and Gold, Neil Young has said in interviews that the song had kind of eluded him. He was never able to get the right take or the right players involved, whether it was Crazy Horse or other groupings of players through the years. He said he came close in 1981. But anyway, that is the lead track and the title track. It's a great song. Lots of contributing sounds from all the players featured on this album. It is one of my favorite songs on this album. Another song I want to talk about is Buffalo Springfield Again. So in this time period, up until 1999, when Neil started work on this album, he was also in parallel working with Stephen Stills to put the finishing touches on a long-awaited Buffalo Springfield box set. And he invited Stephen Stills up to Broken Arrow Ranch in California, and they kind of put together what they had determined was going to be the final running order of this multi-disc Buffalo Springfield box set. And reading some interviews, Neil Young said at the end of that kind of session and working session with Stephen, he felt a little bummed out because it seemed like they were kind of closing the door for good on Buffalo Springfield. There had been rumors in the 80s up until, into the 90s. Oh, Buffalo Springfield's going to get back together. There's going to be a reunion tour. There's actually some footage on YouTube of the guys actually rehearsing. I think it was around the time of, this is even like after right up until he recorded Ragged Glory 1991 with Crazy Horse. There's a rehearsal tape out there on YouTube with Buffalo Springfield. And they were playing a couple songs that would eventually find their way on Ragged Glory. So pretty interesting. Anyway, back to the story. Neil felt, kind of nostalgic about Buffalo Springfield, and the fact that he was in a band, and it was one of the first bands that he was in when he moved to California, and famously hooked up with Stephen Stills, Richie Furay, and the other guys. So we have probably the most up-tempo song on this album, Buffalo Springfield Again. It's a nostalgic look back at the band. There's an incredible lyric to it. It's got a little bit of a rollicking feel. And it's a bittersweet tune. One of the best tracks on the album. I think it's number 2 on side 1. The themes of this album are similar to that album that came out in 2005, which was Prairie Wind. although I feel Silver and Gold is a stronger album. But the theme is all about unconditional love and just kind of love of your family. The last song on side 2 is called With Rings, and it's a very, very unique song by Neil. It's one of the few songs that he's actually singing in probably his lowest register. So real interesting. It's just him and accompanied by his guitar, acoustic guitar, probably one of his vintage D28s. And it's a real emotional song. Hard to describe. You need to listen to it, but very unique to hear Neil not going up at all in his register as far as his singing style is concerned. There is an absolute classic song. It's one of the best Neil Young songs in his catalog, and I know that is saying a lot, and that is Razor Love. Razor Love clocks in at about 6.5 minutes. It is the second to last song on the album on side 2, and it is a super emotional, evocative song. It starts with Keltner doing a shaker to kind of start the song. Neil is strumming likely a D28, and you also have very understated piano by Ben Keith. And the vocal is, I think it's a love letter to Neil Young's family at that point in time. So, I think what Neil was trying to get across in this song is he was looking back to coming home, and he only had short periods of time when he would come home to his family and his wife at the time, Peggy. But it is a touching, almost bittersweet song if you think about what's happened over time. Not only with the relationship and the marriage with Neil and Peggy, but we lost a couple of the players on this album about 10 years down the line. Ben Keith passed away in July of 2010, and then we lost Donald Duck Dunn 2 years later in 2012. But if you play Razor Love, those kind of thoughts come into your mind about time moving forward, and just there's no stopping Father Time. Last song I wanted to mention, another song about family. It's Daddy Went Walking. Neil here is talking most likely about his father, Scott Young, who was in ill health at that time. Neil and Scott Young had kind of a to and fro relationship through the years. Scott Young died in 2005 during the recording, I think, or just up to the release of Prairie Wind. There's more songs about his father on that album as well. But this is just a very, very understated, emotional album. I don't think it gets the attention it deserves. That is episode 2 of Liner Notes. Today we took a look at the 2000 album released by Neil Young called Silver and Gold. I went on Discogs. There are copies available. Kind of strange. I think it was only released back in 2000, but there are sealed copies available for between $22 and $30. Give this album a listen on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you stream. I think it's worth owning. I've had it in my collection for about 5 years. Originally had it on CD when it came out, and I remember it just kind of caught me as kind of a deep Neil Young album. At first, it might have been overlooked. I thought, a little breezy, a little acoustic, but it's definitely what we call a grower. The more you listen to this album, the more I think you'll like it. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope to have another video out sometime midweek this week, and we're going to be continuing on with another mastering engineer in that other series I've been working on. Hope everybody has a great day. Take care.